let's get ready for the Masters and a presidential election and understand the rise of the all-star of Fox News. Let us start with story number one. He is the executive editor and the host of Special Report. He is Bret Baier, and he's now on the Will Cain Show. What's up, Bret?
Hey, Will. Good to be here. You got all the sound effects. It's cool.
It's a big week for you. You're a big sports fan. I usually talk to you around NASCAR, but I know you're a big fan of golf. So aren't you supposed to say isn't the typical white guy introduction? Hey, man, how you hitting them?
Yeah, right. Listen, I love this week. This week starts with the NCAA, championship, and it ends at Augusta National. And I don't know, it's something about this sports week, and plus you're sprinkling in baseball in between. I think it's just awesome. I love the Masters. I love the sound. The sound on my phone is my ringtone. I'm going to dial it up for you here. It's let's see, right here. Here we go. That is my ringtone. Hello, friends.
I don't hear it. Why is that not coming through?
Can you get it?
But
No?
it's the theme of the Masters. Yeah, I got it. You know what? By the way, a sign of a seasoned television professional, one comfortable in his skin, is one okay with silence as he dials up his ringtone. It takes a level of confidence to say this silence is going to be okay. Here comes the payoff. Hey, if you were offered something by Live or the PGA to do golf, Bret, and I'm not going to put you against Jim Nance, and I'm not pitting you against any other big professional, but be honest with me. And I'm not even saying you would sacrifice Fox News. So supplement Special Report. You would say yes to golf.
I probably would think about it. Yeah. I really, really like it. And I love golf announcing, good ones, knowing when not to talk and knowing when to talk. I think Jim Nance is the best in the business. He's a buddy of mine, and he's really just so smooth when the big moments happen. And I think he's great at every sport, but I really think he shines at Augusta this week.
How good are you? And listen, I saw you in Florida at a charity golf event. I didn't play. You played. And by the way, the image of Bret Baier on a golf course was not exactly up to my expectations. I don't mean how you play. I mean, you have a very buttoned down public image, Bret, and you came out there to that golf course. It was a charity event for Folds of Honor. And did you have screaming red, white, and blue America pants on? You had something very loud.
Yeah, I play in the Lake Tahoe American Century Celebrity Tournament. And I'm playing in a tournament next week in Dallas, actually. They invited a celebrity championship. And I wear the funky pants, the John Daly pants. It's really the only way the Fox guy gets on NBC. It's the only way. But I started doing it years ago, and for some reason the flag pants are a big hit. So I do that. I am a 2.5 index. I used to, back in college, be scratch, but I've been creeping up a little bit, and now my son beats me, which is tough to handle, but it's very good too. There's a dual side to it.
Used to be scratch, now at 2.5. Wow, Baier, that's incredible. I'm going to weave in some of your personal story, and I want to revisit something you just said about golf as we talk. But let's start with a little bit of politics here. Yeah. I'm going to provide you with a multiple choice, okay? You can do with it what you will. But I want to ask you sort of which of these options is Joe Biden's best path to the presidency, And these, in my estimation, are the most 4 likely outcomes. And I'm curious what you will say. So option A, Bret, he continues with the narrative of Donald Trump represents a threat to democracy. To me, I think he runs a real risk of fatigue. There's a New York Times article a month ago or so about fatigue within the resistance. So option B, he continues to push on abortion, but I think earlier this week that Donald Trump kind of undercut that as this, screaming, hair on fire, Donald Trump's going to outlaw abortion. So option C, we go down the path of manipulation. There's going to be incredible censorship. The manipulation could also come in the form of polling. There is a question right now of how accurate the polling is. People wonder if the right itself is diluting itself when it comes to the current standing of the race. And option D, they replace Joe Biden. Now, you're happy I welcome you to select none of the above, but which of those four options do you think represents the most likely path to victory for Joe Biden?
So I think it's a combination of A and B. I think that B more so. I really do think the abortion issue is going to be, they're going to hammer it. You've got on the ballot in Florida, a 6-week abortion ban that voters are going to vote on. You have what happened in Arizona yesterday with the court action hitting it back to an 1864 law that essentially bans all abortions. Now, I don't know if it's going to work, but they're going to run every ad possible to really hit this issue. And it is a wedge issue that Donald Trump was trying to get out of by saying it's the state's choice. But 2 days later, Arizona then had this ruling, and the choice that they made really, raised some questions about, how this issue is going to play. So I do think A and B. I thought D for a long time. I thought that there was going to be a replacement. I thought that Democrats might try to do something, but more and more, I don't think that that's an option, even at the convention. So I think this ticket is probably the ticket you're going to see.
Well, let me revisit C then for a moment. This idea of polling. Do you think that the current state of the race, which would lead us towards D, it would make us think there would be a move to replace Biden, because the current polling is really bad for Joe Biden. But, I've had some people say to me recently, Brett, look, they've said the right has a problem with polling, that it's not exactly the picture that you think right now. Do you think this really pessimistic view of Joe Biden is what's really going on out there in America?
I think since the State of the Union address, there has been a little bit of a bump towards him, just slightly, in swing states and other polls. There have been a couple of polls just this week that show him leading in some place that he was trailing before. So I do think it's shifting a little bit. I'm sick of polls. I really, I don't like focusing on them too much because there's a lot of variance here. And when it says plus or minus 6 or plus or minus 5, that poll is essentially, it's anybody's ball game if they're anywhere near that. So the only polls I really look at is after we get to September, likely voters in swing states. I look at those closely. But until then, the general big picture polls, it's just a snapshot and gives you, some sense of things, but I don't like to focus on them.
All right, I want to focus on Bret Baier for just a moment. So, New Jersey, Rumson, Catholic. How do you pick DePaul University, which, by the way, is not DePaul University. It's DePaul with a W. There's no, I believe, in our age group, Brett, I believe it would have been called like an NAIA school. Now it's Division III. So there was no big sports draw that I'm aware of that puts DePaul on the map for you. So how do you go to nowhere, Indiana from New Jersey to DePaul?
Well, I played golf there, and I was going to be on the team, and I was either Northwestern or DePaul. I was going to walk on to the Northwestern team, and my dad went to DePaul University in Indiana. He played football.
Okay.
There. So it was on the radar to just check out. And then when I got there, they were really focused on the golf team. Long story short, I visited and stayed at the Sigma Chi house where the golfers stayed. There happened to be a 50 keg weekend that weekend with a band. And I really made my decision pretty easily. But more importantly, I played golf all 4 years. And it was a great team. And that's why I ended up there. I ended up being the first anchor of the TV station at DePaul, which really sucked. It was a horrible, there were 4 viewers in Terre Haute. I could name them like Sally, Bob, Sue, thanks for watching. But it was a start, and so they did have a TV program too.
Okay, so some similarities, by the way, with my story. By the way, you're a man of the world. You're a sports fan. You're a man who knows things. But I'm still going to put you to the test. Do you know the mascot of Pepperdine?
Pepperdine. I do not know the Pepperdine mascot.
Oh, I feel vindicated in that I couldn't have named DePaul before I looked it up in preparing our conversations. The DePaul Tigers. It's the Pepperdine Waves. And
the Waves.
I went there. My dad did not go there, but I wanted to walk on to, in my case, it was water polo, and played for 4 years. Played very, very gratuitous complimentary word for me. I was on the team for 4 years. But that's what took me to Pepperdine. So, okay, cool. Golf takes you to DePaul. And by the way, I also did the campus station there, broadcast journalism degree. And Bret, I left. Like, I left the idea. I wanted to be a sports broadcaster, but I didn't like the major because I felt like it was teaching me to be an actor. It was all about like how you present, perform, read a prompter. And these were things that I didn't enjoy learning. It wasn't until then I went to law school and enjoyed thinking that I began to think more again about journalism.
Yeah. So, I was a double major. I was English and political science. So I was kind of focused on the studying part. The TV part was kind of on the side. I did enjoy, I knew that journalism was going to be it by that time. I had interned at a bunch of different stations. And I kind of felt like that was my deal. And I left there to write for CNN, actually, for Bernard Shaw in Atlanta. And then I got my first on-air job at WJWJ-TV, Hilton Head, South Carolina. The station is in Beaufort, South Carolina. And I was the Low Country Bureau reporter, covering loggerhead sea turtle nesting and what color the azaleas were in the media and all that stuff.
Yeah, and then from what I understand, you send a tape in early to Fox News. You get hired as the Atlanta correspondent. But the part of your story that I find fascinating is September 11th happens. You drive to Washington, D.C., you cover the Pentagon, and you never went back to Atlanta. At least that's what your bio says. So how did that happen? Roger Ailes, I assume, really liked the work you did covering the attack on the Pentagon, and next thing you know, you're the Pentagon correspondent?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Before I get to Fox, there's a couple more stops, local affiliates, and then Fox starts. The Atlanta Bureau starts in my apartment with a fax machine and a cell phone. I cover the Southeast and South and Central America, bouncing around, doing stories, beaming them up to the mothership in New York. And then 9/11 happens. First plane hits. They say, we need you to back up in New York, get a flight, come up here, do affiliate shots, Fox affiliate shots. Second plane hits, they said, we need you to drive. So a producer and me hop in the car from Atlanta, start driving. Third plane hits, they reroute us to the Pentagon, and we start doing live shots for Fox affiliates around the country with the burning Pentagon behind me. And I never left. We didn't have a Pentagon full-time correspondent there. And they said, do you want to be the Pentagon guy? And I said, yeah. So I was on a trip with then Defense Secretary Rumsfeld as he's making the case for war overseas. And they are packing up my stuff in Atlanta. And I'm getting a buddy to get me a apartment in Washington, D.C. And that started my career. I covered the Pentagon for 6.5 years, traveled to 74 countries through the Pentagon and then the White House. But the funny story that I tell is that I give the advice, always do the dishes if you're leaving on a business trip, because the Ubers packed up all my stuff in Atlanta and they wrapped the dirty dishes in the boxes. So by the time I got home from overseas, it was like an archaeological dig. I'm like undoing chicken parmesan from weeks ago. So that's my piece of advice.
It seems like, Bret, and listen, there is no such thing as an overnight success. I really believe that. Maybe you can find your examples of that I think are the outliers. Overnight successes are just the front-facing element of things that are built behind the scenes. But it seems like, it's a rocket ship that takes off from that moment. I believe, within 7 years, 8 years, you're the host of Special Report after that. It's 10 years from joining Fox News to you hosting Special Report. But if you look at that, is that the big moment for you? Is it that trip to D.C.? Is it never returning to Atlanta? Like, what is the big moment for your career?
100%. It was 9/11. I mean, that was a game-changing moment that, I had bounced around doing all kinds of stories, politics stories. I always wanted to be on Brit Hume's show. He was a mentor, still is a mentor and friend. And so, in the early days, he used to call it a teaching hospital because he had a lot of young reporters, and he was coming from big network TV. But yeah, that was it. When I got that move, I think covering Tallahassee, the recount, really, gave me little chops covering the presidential recount down there and bouncing from courtroom to courtroom. But that moment of 9/11 and covering the Pentagon during the beginning of the war in Afghanistan and then the war in Iraq and traveling overseas, it really was the moment. It's 15 years this past January since I took over for Brit, January 2009. And fortunately, he's still on the show. He'll be on the show tonight as a chief political analyst.
I didn't get to do this, and I'm jealous that you did. And if I think about one of the most fun jobs to do, for me maybe this is very personalized, but one of the most fun jobs to do, I would think, would be the job that is now done by Peter Doocy, that you did, and Jackie Heinrich, and you did as well for a while, which is, chief White House correspondent, to be in that press briefing room, to be the only reporter in a room to cross-examine a president. Now, your situation is different in that you were covering George W. Bush, and the room sees its job as cross-examining the press secretary. But I think you would agree that Jackie or Peter are outliers within the room largely. I just think that would be incredibly fun, especially with a Democratic president, where the rest of the room is really. This will be my characterization, not yours, but you welcomed away and carrying water instead of doing the job of actually asking hard questions. And I just think it would be incredibly fun to be. I was in a much, much lower level situation. I was that voice on ESPN, like the one voice saying something different. In a way, I started out at CNN. I was not one, but I was one of the few on CNN saying something different. I just think it would be incredibly fun to do that and to cross-examine someone who's just not used to being cross-examined.
Yeah, I mean, we used to, covering the Bush administration, everybody was asking tough questions, I think, and there was, a lot of effort to get the story of the day. The White House is an interesting place to cover because it's obviously a soda straw. It all comes out of there, but the best way to cover the White House is actually to talk to people outside the White House about what's happening behind closed doors. But Peter and Jackie do a fantastic job. And you're right. I mean, they are a shining light in that briefing room, pressing on questions that end up being the news of the day. I mean, other networks take the answers that, Peter and Jackie are questioning, and it becomes the news of the day. I think that's similar to when I took over for Brit. There were a number of stories, saying, this young guy's taking over, and the Obama administration is starting. This is going to be the end of Fox News. So I would get these questions like, is it the end of the network? It's the Obama administration. And I said the exact opposite. We're going to be tough but fair, but we're going to ask tough questions. And, we're going to cover the place, not like everybody else, I assume. And in fact, Fox soared during those times. We were number one, but kept on growing at that moment.
Hey, you made a joke earlier. I'm just going to follow my own curiosity. You made a joke earlier about it's the only way the Fox News guy gets on NBC, talking about your pants. A former colleague of ours, Geraldo, I noticed this tweet that he put out the other day about it was marking the end of Curb Your Enthusiasm and this interaction he had with Larry David, how, Larry David would not look at him, would not interact with him at Alan Dershowitz's house because he was Fox News, even if Geraldo said something different than a lot of people on Fox News, because he was Fox News. I'm just curious, you live in a world that I don't live in, Bret, where you interact with a lot of people of different political backgrounds at high levels of power, but you also interact with a lot of people in the media who are at, I'm sure, and you're friends with a lot of people, I'm sure, from CNN or NBC or ABC. I'm curious, what do you feel like in any way you are treated differently as a person because you are at Fox?
Yeah, I mean, for years and years and years, people paint with a broad brush. We're like a newspaper, as you well know, a news side and an opinion side, and so yeah, for the people who don't watch Fox, who don't know me, and what we do, um, yeah, in certain circles in Washington, you're not welcome. But over time, that goes away, and I've worked with a lot of those folks in other networks and other papers, established relationships. Uh, we often cover things differently. And so I've been surprised actually since the Trump administration, um, how emotion has played in more and more to some coverage, and where it wasn't before, as far as just reporting, as opposed to being emotional about it. So yeah, it does affect things. It affects kids in schools. It affects all kinds of things. But it's been really good over time that Fox has invested in the news program to the point where, in a lot of those circles, they realize that a lot of times we're leading the way on stories that they're following on, and changes the dynamic.
I didn't even think about that. I should have, because I lived in New York City for 15 years and I experienced it, but now I live in Dallas. So when you talk about who cares how it affects you, right? It's affecting your kids in school. How it affects your kids in school is such an interesting point. You and I've only had a few personal conversations. I know the story of your son. You have two sons, as do I, one of which I think Paul was born with all the heart troubles. What I would love to just ask you, you don't have to rehash, because I think a lot of people do know that story, but how's he doing now? I know that's an incredibly hard. I don't know. I can only assume I know it's your low moment. You just said it recently at an awards banquet that we all have our highs and lows, and for you, that's your low. But how is he now? How is he today?
He's awesome. He went through 4 open heart surgeries, 10 angioplasties. It was touch and go at the beginning of his life. He is now 6'4". He's the guy that's beating me on the golf course. He is a 1.9 handicap. And so as I was in the hospital all those times, I would have these images of walking down the first fairway with my son saying, that's how I'm going to get through these bad times. Now I am walking down the first fairway with my son and he's kicking my ass. So I had to, it is at one point a very wonderful thing and it's beautiful. And then the other point, it's very humbling. No, but he's doing awesome. And we're blessed. I think he's out of the woods as far as other surgeries. His heart's pumping the right way, and he's a big boy.
How old is he?
He is 16. Got the driver's license.
Oh,
he's full on driver.
I have a 6'4", 16-year-old as well. So
wow,
he
16 and 13.
He cannot golf like your son. What's that?
What's your other? You have 2?
2. The other one is he'll turn 13 in a week or 2, and I think he's going to be taller than the 6'4" kid. They both picked soccer.
So Daniel is a
really?
basketball
Same age
player. He is 6 feet tall, and he's 13.
Oh, wow! 6 feet already. Mine's 5'8" to 5'9" range. He soon be 13. He could be really tall. You're 6 feet at 13.
He's a big boy.
Yeah.
He's playing AAU basketball.
So back to the pro side here for a second. Hardest interview you've ever done?
Hardest interview I've ever done. That's a good question. I think that the President Obama interview before the healthcare law, 3 days before Obamacare passed the House, it was an interview that I think he just wanted to be 30,000 feet and kind of talk big picture about ACA, and I was really in the weeds. And so, the first question he answered about 4 minutes long. And the second question, it was like 2 minutes long. And behind the camera was a guy with an iPhone that was ticking backwards from the 25 minutes that I was allotted. So I had a choice whether to press on these specifics or not, and I chose to press. So it got a little heated there, but I was asking the question, do you get to keep your doctor? Like all these big things that were getting ready to be voted on. So that was probably the toughest interview. But I've had interviews overseas that, in the middle of war zones that have been really tough too. Seeing the young men and women serving over there in Afghanistan and Iraq was pretty tough. Seeing their colleagues fall on the battlefield.
That experience with President Obama is something that I think people that watch don't often appreciate, or it's such a delicate dance. How much do I interrupt? And President Obama was notorious for filibustering, going incredibly long on his interviews, and interviews that only are given a certain amount of time to talk. I think it's a dance even for me today, not really today, but it's often like, hey, when do you interrupt? When you let someone talk? And, I always err on not interrupt, but you just have to sometimes. It's just the way it is. The toughest situation for you that I can think of, or one of the toughest, is debates. Like you doing the debate, like how much to interrupt, how much to move it along, how to be fair. Forget the debate prep on like what questions you're going to ask and all that. That's its own bear. But just the dance of a debate moderation, I don't know. I don't know that you ever walk away from that feeling like you like a scratch golf game. Like it's a mess.
So I met with the late Jim Lehrer, who I considered really, really good at that. If you looked at a debate that he moderated, you didn't think about him. You didn't think about the moderator. If you could come away from a debate and the moderator doesn't pop into your mind, that what pops into your mind are the answers of the candidates, that's a really good moderator. That you press, that you look for good questions and get and react to answers, but you're not the story, you're not the focus. And so that's the real challenge. These primary debates, it's about time, it's about juggling, it's about fairness, it's about
right.
You don't want to be accused of not giving somebody equal time. But when you get down to two candidates, it's a different ballgame, and you really want to just have that conversation be about them.
Will there be a Trump-Biden debate?
I think there will. I think there has to be at least one. That's what I'm thinking. I think if the president wants to say that he's capable at the job and wants to show that he can do it, he's going to have to get on that stage. Former President Trump is chomping at the bit, obviously. And I bet there'll be other efforts like town halls and that sort of thing. But there has to be at least one debate. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do all of them.
I would be a little surprised. All right. Do you have a pick for Masters champion?
I think this year is going to be Rory's year. I think Rory is playing really well. He's coming into it in the right headspace. If he doesn't win, I think Dustin Johnson could surprise. And he's playing really well on the LIV Tour and hits it a mile. So does Rory.
The NCAA tournament taught me maybe sometimes it's just good to go chalk. So I'm going to go Scotty Scheffler.
Yeah. No, he's awesome.
And he seems to be an awesome person. I've never met him, and I'm a homer. He's from Dallas, but he seems to be an awesome guy. As was this conversation. I appreciate you entertaining the personal questions and the professional questions, and we'll be watching tonight on Special Report. Thank you, Bret.
All right, man. Have a good one.